Chapter 3. Runeshifting is a bit different from dislocation. We are taught in school that the runeshift is a tool passed down for a few thousand years. The number dates back as far as the academic literature discusses it. None can pinpoint the magic involved, who invented or discovered it, or why. In fact, the only speculation as to why such a thing would have been invented falls apart with people like me and Clement. We have lost our powers and can normally use them with limited success, and ordinary people cannot use them at all. Early chroniclers believed it was for non-magical kings to travel, but they were unable to substantiate this in their studies. Nowadays, their mention is but a brief paragraph in relics class. No one really cares about it in the magical world because they can easily dislocate anywhere, and it is used 1,000 times a day. They're quite lucky because in a split second they can go where they imagine as easily as walking through a shimmer wall. I always wondered why they were here among us at all. I guess it is no different than a poleaxe on display in a castle now. Once important, but now well, relic. I won't enjoy this. They warned it would take me time to recover. I sincerely hope it isn't a long delay to reach my parents.
Thank you, Clement, very much for all of your help. Please tell Monica I will return as soon as possible, I said, reaching to shake his hand. Make sure you do, my friend. We care deeply for your parents and you, and we must know the cause of this. Farewell, he said.
One deep breath, a glance up at McCord again, and I traced the rune as instructed. Ugh! No, not like a shimmer wall at all. I felt as if all of my particles were sucked into a rune-shaped hole, all stretched and mashed with my sides scraping along the sharp stone edges I had just finished admiring. Quite nauseous as well. No, I don't like this one bit. It's also taking quite a long time. At least, that's what I perceive. I detect a storm. No, it is the storm from my childhood, from the trip on the sailing ship. It's below. I can see my father. That means up ahead should be the dragon. I can observe it clearly now, where it was hidden by rain at first, and I couldn't recall many details accurately. I am surveying the events of my dream, not re-experiencing them. It is an old dragon. Its scales thick and rough, its four horns curl around themselves, like perhaps an ibex, but also curved away from its head, more like a Jacob's sheep. The thick scales across the top of its head layer down the back of its long neck, and its ridged back spines poke from between the scales. They're green, but not mossy or plant-like, more like old copper. It is a copper dragon. Lightning rips around the clouds and then below us. Its underbelly is smaller, younger scaling, and is indeed copper. I feel myself tightening, starting at my feet. Pained releases of air escape my teeth as I grimace from the pain. My eyes tightly shut. I begin stretching again, but my head starts to feel the scraping like before. I must be coming through now. The scraping zips from head to toe, and I perceive a humming in my ears. Then I collapse onto what feels like stone. There, you shall be all right in a minute, or two. It was a familiar voice. Professor Templeton. Right, I am in London. I push him away gently, stumbling, and open my eyes enough to view my immediate surroundings. I spot a patch of grass. I think grass, and vomit a little on it.
McCourt, is he?
Right here, he is fine, Templeton said reassuringly. Not so happy I had the sauerkraut. Now, I look around and find myself in a small basement room that appears to be made of carved, solid sandstone. I lost the contents of my stomach onto what I thought was grass. It wasn't grass. It was straw. But, oh well, better than the professor's feet. Here, have some water to wash your mouth clean. He handed me a large glass mug, so I used it. How was it, considering?
Awful, if I am to be honest. I hurt all over, almost as though I had been beaten with clubs through a keyhole by a dozen burly men.
Only now did I think about the time that had passed since I tried runeshifting. It had been more than 10 years, and I swore it wasn't worth it to try again. I suppose it is true that physical pain doesn't linger in the mind or memory as long as the events that cause it.
You have some bruising around your neck. We couldn't be sure if it would be discomforting, only that it would work. Feel up to heading to a place to lie down? I have a small room prepared for you through this basement door. You can rest as long as you need. I will bring some brandy, which should help you relax a bit. He helped me up from the rune wheel and through the door to the small rope bed with a goose feather mattress. I took another drink of the mug and leaned against the wall, groaning a bit. I will take McCourt up and let him out while you are resting. I will be right back.
Templeton called my owl to his arm and took him up the creaky old stairs. Reclining, I started to feel better. I turned to look at the small table next to the bed, which genuinely did hurt, due to the bruising he spotted on my neck, most likely. There was a pitcher and basin, so I leaned over and poured some water into the basin and splashed it on my face a few times. The nausea did abate some. A few deep breaths and I did it again. I wonder if all the stretching I felt made me taller. Don't be ridiculous. Still, I would take an inch or two without complaint. The stairs began creaking again, and the professor came down with a glass of brandy. Trusting his advice, I tried a sip, but liquor never agreed with me. Often the scent alone would make me ill. This did seem to help, though. Its warmth soothes my sore neck and settles the nervous tension throughout my body.
I take it runeshifting was much different than dislocation. It sounds worse than I had hoped.
Yes, sir, it was. I leaned back to the bed and the wall again. I told him what the experience was like and about the detail in which I was able to view the dragon from which I was injured that day so long ago.
A copper dragon? Astonishing. I cannot say the last time one was spotted in the open, near so many ordinary people at that.
He sat down in the chair at the table, adjusting his jacket tails from under his bottom and straightening his shirt as well. Templeton was wearing a nice camel-colored jacket and a black paisley silk vest with bright maroons and yellows. He was not wearing a tie. In fact, his top buttons were undone. I had never seen him relaxed, I guess.
It may explain one part of the tale, though. The lightning which enveloped you, as you stated, could in fact have ricocheted off a copper dragon's scales, whereas another the dragon family would have been fatally wounded.
I suppose so.
I have also brought you some of this powder from a tree bark, which was first brought back when your father visited the Brazilian rainforest. Concentrating on the appropriate compounds in the potions lab should also help alleviate some of the pain. Give it a try.
He handed me a spoonful out of a jar, and I put it in my mouth. Another big drink of water, and it was down. I took another sip of the brandy.
I remember the trip. In fact, it is the only dislocation I remember before the accident.
I had my pet horny toad I had caught in Texas. I would hold him in my hand, slightly sideways, and rub his belly, and he would go to sleep. I had him with me for 2 years, night and day. When we went to Brazil, I made a small carrying box for him to stay safe while we were in the tent. I didn't want any animals to kill him or to lose him in a strange place. I stopped, remembering him and how much he meant to me, wincing before I finished telling the professor. When I woke up after our first night in the rainforest, Brazilian fire ants had gone into his box and killed him. There were hundreds all over him when I woke up. I felt terrible. I had done all I could do to care for him, but he had no defense against those ants he'd never lived with before.
I am sorry to learn that, Raileanu. I sincerely am, he said, looking down at his feet.
A sorrowful wave of memories he must have had washed over him, shutting his eyes for an instant, turning his head slightly. Sometimes none of us survives being unprepared in unfamiliar environments, Professor. It was my fault for wanting to take him from his home. He trusted me, and I wanted my friend to join me on my adventure. I have been more cautious since then with such things, I explained. It is no reconciliation, but I recall your friendship with that little toad, as your parents relayed to me. That's when your mother began to call you her little frog. Surely you comprehend the connection now? She also feared for you each time you ventured forth into lands unknown to you, especially after you lost the magical abilities our kind has counted on for thousands of years to keep us safe. He sighed when done. Well, sir, I did have the advantage of being born a Texan. That makes me the toughest among wizard kind, does it not? I let a chuckle out. Laughing a bit to himself, Templeton agreed. I suppose so. Sir, does the old Norse cobbler still have a shop in the alley south of the Thames? I wondered. Indeed, he is my outfitter for each new climate I venture to. Why do you ask? He wondered. Well, it occurs to me now, knowing the violence and disruption the runeshift will cause, it is likely prudent to have a closer representation of local attire before I go. If I'm to travel 30 to 40 miles south after arriving in this manner, especially if I am unlucky enough to arrive on the Runeville in a heap amongst ordinary folk, I should not also stand out in appearance. The professor began to nod a bit. Take my boots, if you will, please. Take my boots, if you will please, to him, and have some American-style boots made of brown leather, and an oilskin duster similar to the overcoats worn by Norwegian whalers in the North Sea. Only the coat, please. No liner, for God's sake. It's August. He should have one of those on hand, if I remember correctly. My shirt, deerskin waistcoat, and trousers should be acceptable as is. I reached into my coat pocket and opened the coin purse, and sure enough, discovered 10 full goldens. I handed the professor all 10, as I was hoping to have the items ready by morning so I could leave then. Excellent plan, my friend. I will go right away. Oh, when I was upstairs, Lady Laverne and your mother were waiting at their portraits for word of your arrival. I told them all had went well. Your mother said not to worry, all was in hand, and Arterous had arrived safely to assist. She will dispatch him to the rune wheel when you are ready, so you shouldn't be alone when you arrive. Slapping his knee and uncrossing his legs, he set off with my boots up the stairs. I slowly took off my coat, waistcoat, and trousers, leaving only my long shirt and long heels, as we call them back home, and climbed onto the thick mattress, pulling the heavy quilt over myself. I turned the lamp down, lifted the glass, and blew out the flame. I had to sleep. I slept until morning, and I could detect breakfast being cooked. Eggs and ham. Sounded like a cast-iron wood stove on the floor above. I sat up on the bed and put my feet down. The floor was chilly. I dressed except for my boots and poured myself a mug of water, which helped alleviate my dry mouth a bit. I picked up my rucksack and headed up the stairs, still quite sore and stiff. My neck turned a bit easier, but not much. At the top of the stairs, I went through the door and was, in fact, in the kitchen. Professor Templeton was at the table already eating. His housekeeper, Karina, was cooking at the wood stove in the corner by the window. Professor, I do not recognize this house. Where are we exactly? I asked, and carefully lowered myself into a chair across from him. No, you would not recognize it. It belongs to the university, serving as a temporary housing for traveling lecturers. I visited a guest speaker here almost 20 years ago, and she brought the runestone to my attention. Apparently, the university and the royal family came to an agreement several hundred years ago to grant ownership of the sites housing such relics, once the proof of indigenous language creation was out. He poured some goat milk into a small glass for me and continued eating his own breakfast. I see. The medicine you gave me last night must have worked, at least to some extent. Is there still bruising on my neck? I stretched my chin up so he could see better. No bruising, only some reddish streaks. That's quite good. Well, I feel as if the beating was a week ago, but better, I suppose. Karina set a plate down for me, with ham and eggs. I offered thanks and ate it swiftly. Manners were not important after I had detected good food nearby. My stomach had begun grumbling as I awoke and smelled the meal being prepared. Are we far from the cobbler's shop? I finished chewing and waited until both of us could speak. The habit some have of putting food in their mouth more energetically as they speak has always put me off. Manners or not, it seemed uncivilized. No, not far at all. We're in the Morden Place area, a few blocks from his workshop. He had the coat as you requested all ready for sale. He said you could have the boots ready by midday today, he said, finishing the last of his meal after answering me. Good. I feel I should go as soon as possible. I am not so diminished that I should not proceed as soon as then. Even if I leave then, it will be a 2-day ride once I arrive back in Texas, barring unforeseen troubles. I will have a courier pick them up and bring them here. It's 10 o'clock now. Why don't you rest in the sitting room after breakfast? In all likelihood, it will rain all day, he suggested. Sounds good to me, sir. Will any more of the medicine powder help, or does it last a few days? I asked, unconscious that I was holding my forehead at the same time. No, I am certain it only lasts a few hours. I will acquire some more, and a small vial you can take with you, since it will all begin again by tonight. He rose and went into his satchel to retrieve it, hanging on a hook by the kitchen door to the little back garden. Lilac, marigolds, blue days, and a few roses were visible, although due to the rain I couldn't smell them. The small herb pots on the windowsill, however, were filled with dill and oregano, and were some of my favorites. I thanked him again for the gift and the hearty breakfast and returned to bed, the need for rest and recuperation overtaking me once more. The sitting room had only a lounge seat, and I needed to lie down, so I went to the basement room again. Raileanu, wake up! It was the professor. It is almost 2 in the afternoon. Did you want to keep resting? I blinked hard 2 or 3 times and rubbed my eyes. No, thank you. I should be on my way. I sat up, got another drink of water from the pitcher, and exhaled heavily. Have you received the delivery of the clothes? I asked under my breath. Yes, it's here at the end of the bed. He reached for it. Wrapped in heavy brown paper and twine, I untied it and opened it. The boot bore a close resemblance to the Texan vaquero style, being plain with no unnecessary decorative stitching, no extra eyes, a good square toe, and a thick, layered suede and yew wood sole. It should work well enough in the saddle and against rattlesnakes. The oilskin overcoat was underneath the boots. It was a dark, rich brown with a shoulder cape and underarm straps, a tall collar, and deep outer pockets. Thankfully, it had no liner, which would be standard for European ship coats, because August in Texas is incredibly hot. Rolled up, it can make a great pillow when it's hot, and the oilskin will keep me dry in winter or summer. The cobbler said he cast a confusion charm on the shell of the coat. I am curious if it will work or not for you, since you can use some magical objects which are enchanted, he pointed out excitedly. Oh, one more thing. He had a hat that I remember you describing from home, and I can size it properly for you, if it's in fact not felt or woven straw. It is magically made. He used a real straw model, and laying it on his basement mushroom boxes, had these rawhide puffballs grow under a charm to shape around the hat. It is so light, as strong as formed rawhide, waterproof, yet naturally breathable. The only indicator of its non-standard manufacture is its dark olive-brown color and texture. Apparently, it is quite the popular item among the upper magical classes to buy and display. Professor picked it up from behind himself and put it on his head as he turned around, grinning at how he imagined he looked in it. Now,
That is a way of making a hat I did not think of, sir. Could I inspect it? I extended my hand towards him, and he dropped his smile and took the hat off. Actually, wait a moment. I do want to see it on myself. I will go upstairs for a moment, where there is a mirror. I'll be right back. He walked upstairs, letting himself grin again. At the top of the creaky stairs, his housekeeper let loose a loud psh sound before descending into hilarious laughter. I'll have none of that, ma'am. This is a serious piece of kit for our guest. He dressed her down in his tone. To no avail. She kept laughing at him, and by the sound of it, slapping her leg over and over. The professor let a grunt out when he reached the mirror, and I could hear him walking back to the basement stairs. He paused at the top. Corina, you were right. There is no hope for me in the unsettled lands. It was ridiculous. He came back downstairs, eyes on the floor, hat in hand, extended for me. I took the hat from him, for he was quite right about how he looked and about its unique fabrication. I could find no fault in the design or creation. I bent the brim quite harshly, and it popped back to its original form. This is quite nice. Having your hat bent and losing its shape is the worst. I smiled and did it again. Try it on so I can size it for you. I flipped it, held the brim with my right index finger and thumb, and my left fingers on the back. It was likely 2 sizes too large, not surprisingly. Most European men had more hair than I wear, and often their heads are a bit broader, especially at the front. Besides, if they only display them, sizing is not relevant. Here, let me see it, he said, holding his hand out. He took the hat and pulled his wand from the wand sleeve inside his waistcoat. It was the same one I remembered from school, about 9 inches long, of twisted, light-grained wood, with a nickel handle. One circular motion with the wand pointed to the inside of the hatband, and it shrank a bit. He gave it back, and it was as close to perfect as possible. It is perfect. Thank you for everything. I'm going to get dressed and head out. Is McCourt upstairs? Has he eaten and had a good drink? Yes, he was on the table eating a few bits of ham and actually wanted some of my tea earlier. Yeah, he can be quite a rascal sometimes. I'm glad he is full. I was thinking about your rune-shifting trip and the time you experienced, the vision and clarity you had. The professor took a seat at the end of the bed, put his left hand on his thigh and his right hand with the pointer finger extended. When any of us travel across space as we do, it's postulated we are passing into the space between spaces, areas which are not accessible to us but are pervasive, all around us, and we can only pass through them. You having a clear vision of the memory may point to an old idea that the aether isn't only a place we can pass through, but a place where all our consciousness is also stored. Please record any or all of your experiences in these movements in your notes. They may need to be written in the book, as well as the results of your trip and the question of your father's illness. I nod my head as I finish dressing, looking down and to the left where the professor is, hoping I can help my family while trying to keep all this in there too. I pack the coat in my rucksack and pull on the boots. The old Norse cobbler nailed it. They fit like a glove, and even the spots in my old boots, which had rubbed initially but had been shaped over time, were soft and no trouble. One of the many benefits of magic craftsmanship. Can you keep these other boots here? Take them home with you? Holding them up to him. Of course. Do you feel ready? He took the old boots from the floor and set them on the bed beside him. Yes, I need to go and get it over with. I hope that having a few hours from breakfast until now, I don't have the upset stomach problem again. I whistle for McCourt. He comes down the stairs and flies through this room into the one with the rune wheel, standing on the edge of it. He appeared to have no painful difficulties from the travel medium. That made one of us. We walk into the adjoining room as I put the rucksack on, and I take McCourt onto my arm and set him on my shoulder. Thank you, Professor, for everything you have done to help me return home. I will do my best to keep everything in mind you and Clement have told me thus far. I nodded him and received a nod in return. I take a good long look at the rune wheel, trying to discern if any of the symbols match the ones I saw back in Austria. Only one, an H with wavy sides. Sir, is this the one that would take me back to Austria? The one where I came from? No, I don't believe so. The compass watch Clement gave you should show you, though. Deciphering those is something we can work on together when you return, perhaps. Professor Templeton points to the rune I need. I can see where the drop of my blood is on this one. I look at him, nod, and trace my finger onto it. This time, it feels as though it's pulling me through the rune by my arm. And strangely, while stretching, I can tell my body is completely unnaturally bent for an instant. Next, I felt as if my mind was hovering around the rune wheel in Texas already, and I witnessed my body squirt out head first and end with my mind back where it belongs inside my skull, and I'm standing on the disc. Whew. My disorientation was less this time. I set McCord on the rune wheel and sat down, my legs dangling for a moment as the sun was much brighter here, and my eyes were adjusting slowly. Aside from tingling all along my right arm, I don't feel anything out of the ordinary. I look around since I am out in the open, early afternoon in Texas, and I don't spot Arterous about. The rune wheel was carved on an outcropping of bright white limestone near the end of a narrow mesa topped with mesquite trees, spotty broomwood, and bramble. I cannot detect any signs of settlement or trail nearby, and that's good. Grasshoppers, small birds, cicadas are all I can hear. Well, and the scurrying of the large red harvester ants, which only I can detect. My owl seemed to fare well again, but was a little fidgety, so I set McCord off to fly around. Yeah, it is hot up here. Not a cloud in the sky, and the distortion of heat is making anything in the distance appear to wiggle around. So, where would I be waiting for someone in this area? The rise I was standing on runs north-south, so I decided to head down the broken ledges of sandstone, which are interspersed in the limestone on the east side. In places, they seemed to be almost steps, but brittle enough that it wasn't worth the gamble to walk on. Working my way around the east side, being in the shade at this hour, is where I expected I could find him. As I arrive where shade falls far enough from the crest that I am out of the direct sun, I notice a small draw near the hill's base, and a stand of taller, greener mesquite and good growth of cattail grasses, which is a good sign of water. He is probably thereabouts, the horses having to drink quite a bit this time of year to stay fresh, and they can graze along its bank. It takes a good 30 minutes to make my way down, hearing and smelling horses several times on the way down. Ah, good. You have made it in one piece, I see. Arterous shouted from the shade. His accent was noticeable and heavy, and his pronunciation was crisp. Indeed I have. You are a wise man to stay here while you wait, as distances between safe and portable water are difficult to find with regularity around here, I pointed out. A few yards of loose rock still at a difficult slope later, and I made it down to where the ground leveled out. I spent the morning patrolling around, sir. I didn't detect any sign of others nearby. He was speaking loud enough for me to hear, as I was still picking my way through some prickly bush and making racket walking on the loose stone. I thought about going north into a small village I spotted, but not knowing the territory or whether they were friend or foe, I decided to wait here and speak to you first, he said calmly from his seat on an old cedar trunk under some bushes. Thank you, my good man. I was going to suggest that at least one of us be armed properly, even for a relatively short trip. I hope you don't mind my vernaculars beginning to slip back to territorial, especially in the company of others. It definitely keeps the ordinary folk at ease, I said as I made my way down the different ledges of the bank made by sudden rainstorms, which then dry just as fast. How far are we from the copper mine, do you know? I did fly around last night as the cover of dark would be good enough protection from curious observers. I believe it is only a mile north. I could be sure I saw its remnants of an open mine of ore from above before it descended into a mine entrance. There was no one around either that I observed, sir. I could detect his shape through the bushes and undergrowth. He had carved another piece of pork and ate it from the tip of his knife. Coming around the stand of bushes where he was, I could finally see him well. He was at least 6 feet tall, wearing tall black European riding boots, navy blue riding pants under cowhide chaps with patches of black, white, and brown, an Austrian officer's shirt, and a short riding coat. The chaps looked ridiculous, but he may have bought them to protect his pants and tall boots back in Austria, and the shopkeeper thought he was doing Arterous of service. I imagine there was quite a bit of fun poked at him after he left the outfitters. The chaps will help, regardless of the silly appearance, as hardly anything in Central and West Texas exists without thorns of some kind. He had brought with him 2 horses, which is a benefit of dislocation, well, for those who can do it. He can bring anything he is touching at the time he chooses to wherever he is going. They were fit, and by their appearance it seemed they were part of a group, perhaps having been brought from the Americas to Europe in recent months. It had become a big business in recent years, corralling wild mustangs in the American Southwest, shipping them to Europe and Australia to meet the needs of their growing armies. The saddles and hardware were obviously made in Austria and were practically new, but for our purposes, they would work well. Have you also flown our route? Are there any washouts or arroyos that may be difficult to ride through? I asked, untying my horse from the brush and walking it in front of him. Yes, sir. I believe if we stay in this valley, if you can call this a valley, more of a dip between some hills, we should be obscured for a couple of miles from either side. From there, he motioned in the direction he was speaking about with his knife. It is fairly open fields until dark. He stood, standing and brushing himself off, and walked to his horse. I smiled. He had done well on the reconnoiter. Well, fields imply cultivation. Out here, they simply call it a prairie. I smiled and said, Prairies are for riding across and for varmints to live in. Arterous nodded, and his head tilted side to side a bit in learning the distinction. How are my mother and father? I visited with them for about 30 minutes before I left this morning. Your father does not seem any worse than last night. Your mother is strong. She is extremely happy you are almost home. Thank you. I am glad they are all right for now. I stopped, checking the straps on the saddle, and turned to face him. I put my fists on my hips and glared at him. I shook my head side to side. He turned to look at me, nervous at my sudden serious face. What? What is it? Now, Arterous, if I may, you will have to trust me on this. I stopped and thought for a moment, for this had to be taken properly by someone from an aristocratic family. Perhaps leading by example will be more effective. So I stepped to where the little trickle of water is coming out of the ground, and take a couple of handfuls of mud and rub it all over my rolled-up shirt sleeve and arms. Its reddish clay content stains both my skin and sleeves. I rubbed more on my elbows, knees, and up and down the sides of my boots, and some onto my pants. I glanced up at Arterous, who was giving me a look between shock and disgusted indignation. I found a spot of blacker mud and added some of it on as well. What are you doing, sir? Arterous finally asked, his baffled expression revealing his uncertainty about whether he wanted to know the answer. Well, it is 300 miles in the shortest direction to a riverboat or seaport where we could have entered the country. Not many people know anything about my family or me at all. I knelt down to wash some of the residue off my hands, shook them off, and stood again, counting. Continuing. If we appear in the middle of central Texas as though we stepped out of a clothier in Paris, Word of strange business will be in California by week's end. We either appear to belong in our surroundings, or those surroundings will attack and betray us. Please, sir, soil yourself as though we have spent hundreds of miles traveling across hostile land in the oven of summer. It may save your life, I said, still applying dirt to the wet mud and rubbing handfuls of grass on my elbows and knees, using dry grass to scuff my boots and other leather to complete the view for others. Arterous did so, but seemed pained, especially by the activity when he reached his high, spit-shined boots, as he presumably had spent time working on the expansive leather himself at times. Anyone who has worked military leather of that size would suffer physical pain while destroying hours of diligent shine work. I advised him to completely remove the chaps, and perhaps we could trade those in the little village north of here for 2 pairs of older, well-worn ones more suited to our needs. The amount of sweat we both exuded, given the almost 100-degree temperature with thick, heavy humidity and nary a breeze, meant that as soon as we began our trip on horseback, the dust would cake in every fold of skin, completing our look as I wanted. The village was only 3 or 4 miles north of here, if I remember correctly. It was a small Weeco village, loosely affiliated with the Wichita tribe to the north. They were excellent farmers, traders, and hunters. Friendly to most, they made unique beehive-shaped huts, roofed with grass. Usually they had much to trade, including surpluses of buffalo and deer jerky, hides, and vegetables. Before I left for Europe, they had had some skirmishes with the Comanche, as well as with some tribes of Cherokee who had been moving further west as the Americans settled more and more of the land. I suspect that after the struggles with the Mexicans and Texians are mostly over, this group of native Texans will be an important part of the new nation. We need to head to the hill near the Brazos River, where the small village you spotted on your reconnaissance is located. They are the Veiko, and we can buy further provisions before heading to my family's home. Ready to leave? I said, while mounting the horse Arterous had brought for me. Yes, sir. I would very much like to see it up close, he said, grabbing his bedroll, which he had been leaning against when I first arrived, tying it to the back of the saddle. We sent our owls off ahead of us, Arterous ordering his, named Cat, short for Catherine, to return with any news of trouble. After passing out of the shade of the little mesa, the ground continued to slope downhill. It seemed, with the horizontal level of plain grasses lower than the perceived horizon. This time of year, the ground was hard, and although we were fairly near the Brazos, most of the grass was already yellow or outright brown, crunching as the horses walked across it. There were several deep gullies clogged with dry thorn vines and cactus, but not being certain of their actual path in relation to our destination, I decided we should stay on the path due north according to my compass. Using them as cover would be suitable if we were already being tracked or watched. Neither was true as far as I knew, and with Arterous and my compass combined, with the charmed coat, I was hoping we would pass unobserved to our destination. It was only 2 hours, and I could see the rise which marked the outpost, on the south side of the Brazos. A distinct trail appeared now on our right, which in all likelihood followed the river. We were only a mile or so from the Weeco village. With the conflict over, I was hoping there might be a ranger station, or even a real trading post.